Hey, well, it's great to see you this weekend, everybody. Thank you. I want to welcome everybody at all of our locations, whether you are at the Valencia location, inside or outside, in the family room, common grounds, the lobby, wherever you are. For those of you at the Canyon Country location, I want to welcome you as well, and all of you watching online. We're so glad that you're with us this weekend as we continue in our series, Chasing Happy. And this is a 5-part series, and if you've missed any of these so far, the first 3, you can check them out online. You can download the RLC app, and you can watch those and catch up right there and be just right up to date with us on every step of the way. And today we're in week 4 of this, and throughout this series, we've been doing a couple things for you at some of our locations. We created a place called the Happy Place at our Valencia location, where you can have different experiences and different experiences at Canyon Country as well. If you're watching online, hey, you're on your own, okay? But for those of you at the Valencia location this weekend, you can also go outside and do chalk art at the end of our service today, so you're going to want to check that out. And we're also doing something where we have randomly selected some people that told us what they would do with an hour of their time, or maybe for an experience, for fun, for happiness, and we've decided to grant a few of those requests. And some of those are just an hour, and some of those are a little longer than an hour. And the one that we did the other day is a little bit longer than an hour, but really brought a smile to somebody's face. Take a look at this week's segment called The Happy Hour.
Last month, Rusty sent out an email asking the question, if you could spend an hour doing anything you wanted to make you happy, what would you do? Well, we're here at Undergrounds to meet one of those people and to make them happy. Brianna.
Hi.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good.
Hey, so about a month ago, Rusty sent an email out and said, hey, what would give you a moment of happiness just for an hour, just a few hours? And you kind of wrote in, and we read your email, and you said, I would love some quality time with my husband, because we don't get it that much away from kids and away from work. So we want to make that happen today. But you're going to have to share your husband with 20,000 fans, because we are sending you to the Rams-Chargers game today. So we have 2 free tickets for you. We have a parking pass for you. We have money for concessions, so we want to give that to you today so you guys can spend a great day together. And so, yeah, absolutely. Love that, yeah. And although we know that going to a Rams game is not the key to happiness, we understand certainly you guys wanting to get away and spend some quality time away from kids and work. So you better get going, because the game's going to start in just a little bit.
I think I'm still a little bit shocked, honestly. I am so excited to go to the Rams game. He is literally the biggest football fan on the face of this earth. And we've actually been trying to go to a football game for many moons now, and it's never been a reality for us.
This will be both of our first games ever going to, so it'll be nice.
I picked to have alone time with my husband because he works these crazy hours.
Normally I get up at midnight, go start my day at 2 a.m. Some days if there's something going on, I could stay 16 hours.
I just miss him, and I just love him so much, and I always just want a little bit of time, alone time with him, because we're always chasing kids around or working or busy, you know, so doing things, and life gets in the way of just spending quality time with the one person that you just love so much.
We tried doing like every Wednesday going on a date night, and we'd do good for a week or 2, and then it would fall off because life happens.
I often feel like we're kind of always left like a little bit on empty sometimes, so I feel so blessed that we get to have this opportunity, and I think it reminds us why we got married. When we were dating and we made time for each other and we went on dates, and we were very intentional about having that relationship and building it towards a marriage. And I think just being able to reconnect, like, it's so important to take that time out so that way we can come back into loving our kids the best we can, or doing whatever it is that we have to do day by day the best that we can, because we're reminded why I'm doing it. Thank you so much, Rusty. In real life, we're so grateful for this opportunity. We'll never be able to tell you how much we are grateful for this experience. Thank you. Who are you hoping wins? I'll say whatever.
Chargers.
Okay, go Chargers.
Hey, so that was a lot of fun. I love that Jim gave him the tickets and I got thanked for it. That was really cool. So, wrong answer with the Chargers, too, by the way. Okay, so, hey, we're continuing with this series, and it is kickoff weekend around here, so we're celebrating, with the jerseys, and so we're praying for the Chiefs. That's all we pray for, okay? And whether you wore your jersey or not, and whether that makes you happy or not, we're talking about it. We're talking about chasing happiness, because all of us want to be happy. The problem is we find momentary happiness, and then it doesn't last very long. So we're obviously not very good at maintaining happiness. We're really good at having moments of it, but not lasting happiness. So we're trying to figure out how to do that. And we've talked about a variety of things over the course of this series, and like I said, if you have not checked it out, listen to the other messages, and it kind of catches you up to what we're talking about. But today we're going to dive in to one of the biggest issues we deal with when it comes to happiness, and it really comes down to how we define it and how we receive it, and we're going to talk about things that really actually have the ability to make you happy today. One of the things that breaks my heart is something that I know breaks your heart as well, and that is when you're able to see somebody making a decision and you know that's not going to make them happy. You know it might give them a little bit of pleasure, you know it might seem right at the time, but you know over a series of unfortunate events, they're not going to be very happy. And this isn't just something that a pastor sees. This is something you see as well. Everybody sees, because you kind of have a front row seat to somebody else's life, right? And happiness is one of those things that it's really hard to kind of figure out what it is for you, but it's really easy to figure out what it's not for somebody else. Because you watch a couple that, these two kids that just fell in love and they just met and they've been dating for 2 weeks and they're getting married. And you're like, what? Oh, well, no, slow your roll here, okay? That's not going to make you happy. That's going to lead to a lot of trouble. You don't even know this person yet. Do you know their last name? I'm not sure, but we're in love. We're really in love. And you think, that's not going to work. Or you see a couple that has kids and their kids turn 16 and they say, you know what, we just want to give them the best. So we went out and we got her a Mercedes for her 16th birthday. And because, we don't worry about cash or anything, we just gave her a credit card and said, you know what, do whatever you need to do. And you're looking at it going, I don't think that's a good idea. That doesn't seem to make sense. I mean, that'd been great if I was 16 and that was me, but not good for your kids, right? And you see this with couples, you see this with individuals, you see this with businesses. We all see this in other people, but it's hard to see this in ourselves. And what really breaks my heart is when I see this happening to other people, when it's avoidable. And I know it breaks your heart too, because you have friends and family members that you look at and go, oh, don't do it, don't go there. But they do anyway. And for some people, it's kind of like watching, a horror movie where they say, I'll be right back. And you're thinking, no, you won't. You are not coming back. That's the curse. Don't say that. And you see people going, it'll be fine. You're thinking, no, it won't. And so what we're going to talk about today is how, really it's tragic to watch people make decisions that bring more unhappiness upon them, because the world is filled with enough difficulties, right? I mean, just by living, getting up and getting out of bed and walking out of the house, there's opportunities for danger and for problems and for issues. Life has enough trouble of its own. Why would you want to go and add stuff to it? But for so many of us, myself included, we just get really stuck into making dumb decisions that just bring us more unhappiness. It's like we're almost undermining our own happiness. And I think the reason why we do that is because we really struggle with the difference between these two words. And that's the difference between the word pleasure and the word happiness. The word pleasure and the word happiness. Now, before we can dive into that right there, I got to kind of backtrack a little bit, because Jesus sets us up to understand this a little bit. And Jesus tells this incredible little, it's not even really a story, it's more of two metaphors he puts together to help us understand who he is and who we are. And when we begin to understand these two things, we're able to understand the difference between pleasure and happiness. So let's take a look at this verse, because Jesus one day is teaching people, and he's trying to get their attention, and he's trying to use these word images that they will be able to remember and understand. And he starts off with this incredible image, and I'm just going to walk you through this, and we're going to talk about what he says here. Okay, so he says this, all right, the thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. Let's talk about this word thief for just a second. If you've ever had anything stolen from you, you know what that word means. Maybe it was an identity theft kind of thing. Maybe it was a physical kind of, stealing from you. Several years ago, my family and I, we were in Seattle, and we had gone to this hotel, and nice hotel, reputable place, and we go in there, and we unpack everything, and the kids want to go to the pool, so I say, all right, let me just plug in my iPad here on the little desk that they have there in the hotel room so it can charge, because I know the kids are going to want to watch, a show or something later on, so I'm charging that up, and I say, all right, let's go. And so we all leave, we go to the pool, we come back, and I walk in, and the iPad's gone. And what's funny about it is a key card that's used to open all hotel rooms by the help there, by the people that run the place, is laying there on the desk. So somebody was crafty enough to be able to break in. They just left behind the evidence after they stole the iPad. And so I went down front and I said, hey, one of your employees left this on the desk, and they apparently inadvertently stole my iPad. So if we could kind of track that down, that'd be really cool, And so it was this big old investigation and all of that, and we brought in, CSI and fingerprints. And I'm kidding, we never found the thing. But, that the rest of the trip was changed because you're thinking, anybody could get in here. And so every night, I got to do the deadbolt and the lock and push a couch in front of the door, so everybody can sleep because everybody's scared to death because the thief's out there, right? The thieves hasn't been caught yet. Now we laugh about that now, but if you've had that experience, you know what a thief is. And what Jesus is saying is the thief comes to kill and to steal and to destroy. Now, when I say a thief, you might be thinking, okay, well, that must be Satan, right? Not necessarily. You see, the biggest thief in your life and in my life is not just Satan or not demons, but the biggest thief in your life is you. The biggest thief in my life is me. You ask anybody over the age of 16, and you ask them, who's the biggest obstacle to your happiness? And you would say, it's me. The truth is, you are your own worst enemy, and I am my own worst enemy. The worst enemy in my life is that person I look at in the mirror every day, because the bad news is that person is the one that keeps making all the bad decisions. I mean, think about it. Everything you've done wrong in your life is a result of you making the bad decision. Maybe somebody else did something to prompt you. Maybe Satan tempted you. Maybe there was a demon that said, what if you go to Vegas this week? I don't know. But the reality is you made the decision. You're the one that made those choices, and you're your own worst enemy, and so am I. Here's how I know that. Because you bought it. You leased it. You ate it. You drank it. You smoked it, you dated it, then you slept with it, then you married it. You are your own worst enemy, right? Now, some of you thought, you just described my life. I mean, how did he know that? I mean, you and I are our own worst enemy. And some of you are glad that I didn't have any more room up there to write more stuff because you're thinking, I've done all that. And I'm the one that's made all those choices. And Jesus says, you are the thief. It's your decision-making that is undermining your happiness. You can't get out of your own way. And your decisions are stealing your joy, are killing your happiness, and destroying your life. It's like everybody there is thinking, thanks, Jesus. That's great news. Appreciate that. But then he says this. I have come, he's talking about himself, that they, meaning everybody, may have life. And it's almost as if they're all looking at him kind of dumbfounded because he has to further explain it, and have it to the full. And this phrase, to the full, means abundant. And some of your translations may even say that, have life abundantly, which means more than you ever imagined, greater than you ever assumed, better than a marketing pitch on a commercial. I have come to give you life. While all your decisions that you make undermine your life, I've come to bring you life, and a life better than you ever imagined. Isn't that a great statement? This verse is actually where Real Life Church gets its name, because one of the translations says, I've come that they may have real life. That's where it comes from. Jesus says, you are your own worst enemy, but I have come not to leave you in the pit of your own bad decisions. I have come to rescue you from that and give you life better than you ever imagined. Now, just so people begin to get the point, because he's given them that metaphor of the thief and now what he does, he gives them another metaphor. Look what he says next. I am the good shepherd. Now, we don't talk a lot about shepherding much around here because we don't have a lot of shepherds, and we don't deal with that a lot. But this would have been everybody there nodding along because they knew exactly what he's talking about. And they're thinking, oh, the good shepherd. I kind of get that. I'm tracking with you. And he says, I'm the good shepherd who lays down his life for the sheep. And they would have known what kind of shepherds these were because these were the ones that took care of the sheep and kept them from running off because sheep were dumb animals. And they would jump off the side of a cliff, and several others would follow them, or they'd walk right over to where there's danger, or they'd wander off. And the good shepherd keeps them all together, and keeps them safe, and he fights off the wolves coming after them. And when there's a storm, he pushes them all into a cave so that they're out of harm's way. And he stands at the door to protect them of these caves. And if there is danger coming that way, he will fight off those wolves or those animals or those thieves to protect his sheep. And Jesus says, that's who I am. In other words, I am for you. So we have a decision to make. Are you going to go with the thief who keeps undermining your own happiness because of the dumb decisions we make? Or are you going to go with Jesus who says, I'm for you. I want what's best for you. Now, nobody's sitting there going, I undermine my own happiness? Oh, I never thought of that before. That's unbelievable. No, we all know it. We all get it. And when I say the differences between the thief and Jesus, you go, yeah, I'm probably going to go with Jesus on that one. That makes a lot of sense. But here's the reason why we got to talk about this. Because Jesus knows how quickly we drift to the thief. That's why he calls us sheep. It's his kind way of saying, I know you do dumb things. I love you. But you do dumb things. And you do them again because you think it will turn out better the second time. And then you do them again. But what Jesus is saying here is, if you choose me, you're going to get not just happiness, but also pleasure as well. And that's where we get back to these two words, pleasure and happiness. Now, this is where a lot of us that are kind of new to church, or maybe you've never been to church before, or you've stayed away from church for a long time, you've thought that you had to choose between the two, and if you came to church, you might get that, but there's no way you're getting that. And you thought that there's one or the other. Did you know that God not only created you with a capacity for happiness, that's what we've been talking about through this series, and knows the way that you can be happy, but God is also the author of your pleasure. He's also the creator of the capacity for pleasure you have in your life. Most of us tend to think that God's against our pleasure. Guess what? God created you to be able to experience pleasure. Now let's just get real practical on this. God created even sexual pleasure. Now, you might think that that's a man-made thing. It is not. That is a God-made thing. It's almost as if during creation God said, I got an idea. And the angel said, what is it? You wouldn't understand. But here we go. And this is going to be great. God knows how this works best. It's for pleasure, not just reproduction. God also, he created wine. Jesus' first miracle. Now think about that for a second. He's with the disciples. He says, all right, let's get this thing started. We're going to do a miracle. Okay, you're going to heal somebody? Nope, making wine. You want to just slow down there a little bit, all right? That might cause some controversy. And he just starts right out. We don't know if he made beer or anything else than that, but we know that he made wine. Now, that's interesting to me because these are things that people typically think of as a pleasure moment in their life, and God has shown us how he's the author of these things. In other words, that God created us for the capacity for pleasure, just like God created you for the capacity for happiness. God is not against pleasure any more than God is against happiness. Here's the problem. This is the big problem you and I all struggle with. The problem that gets us in trouble is when we make pleasure the priority. When pleasure becomes the priority, we get pleasure for a moment, but we do not get lasting happiness. And in the end, we have neither. But when happiness is the priority, and specifically the principles of happiness we talked about 2 weeks ago, you not only get happiness, but you get a level of pleasure that's greater than you would ever experienced just seeking pleasure. When we apply the principles of happiness, we get both. But when you prioritize pleasure first, you get neither. In fact, what tends to happen is your attempts at pleasure not only forego lasting happiness, they often lead you to displeasure. I mean, think about that in your life. Many of the decisions that you have made that brought you momentary pleasure have not brought you lasting happiness. In fact, they've not just been a pathway to pleasure, it's been a pathway to a prison in your life. And you've turned an escape that was a pleasure into a habit, into an addiction. You turned a pleasure into an experience that ruined relationships. And as a result, you exchange lasting happiness for momentary pleasure. And Jesus says, that's what sheep do. They wander into areas they don't need to go. But I am the good shepherd, and I can protect you. But you got to seek after the right things first. And I will guarantee you the pleasure you get will be far greater than you could get on your own. So a few years after Jesus says this, the Apostle Paul comes around and he writes down just this great way of understanding what happens to us when we seek after pleasure first rather than applying the principles of happiness. Take a look at what he writes in the book of Romans. He says, "Don't you know that when you offer yourselves to someone as obedient slaves, you are slaves of the one you obey?" Here's what he said, don't you know? In other words, I mean, we get this, right? You understand this, right? That when you decide to make this choice, is you become like this slave to somebody else. You were under their control, and then you have to obey them, and you're offering yourself to them. In other words, he's saying if you continue to say yes to this pleasure over and over again, the law of diminishing returns tells you it's not going to bring you as much pleasure the next time, and the next time, and the next time. You know this to be true, right? Because the first time you did it, it was great. And the second time, not so much. Or maybe the first glass was great, but now you need 2, and now you need 3, and maybe even 4. And what he's saying here is when you start pursuing pleasure before the principles of happiness, you are surrendering the control of your life, and you are becoming a slave to seeking that pleasure. And then he says this, whether you are slaves to sin, which leads to death, or to obedience, which leads to righteousness. In other words, you've got a choice here. You can offer yourself over to the pleasures that might give you momentary bliss, but it's only going to eventually undermine your happiness. Or you can offer yourself over to God and the principles of happiness He has for you. And not only will you get lasting happiness, but you'll get lasting pleasure as well. Remember what we said week 1? All happy people are at peace with God and with others and with themselves. And the problem that you and I have is we continually seek after pleasures that undermine our relationship with our spouse, with our kids, with our friends, with our God, and with ourselves. And we are undermining our own happiness in the process. So here's the question I want to ask you. This is the question that you and I have to wrestle with. And that is this question right here. Is there a pleasure that's undermining your happiness? I think you know what I'm talking about. There was something that you started out with, and it's not illegal. Nobody said you can't do it. But it was an escape, and now it's a habit. Maybe even an addiction. And there's something in your life right now that your kids ask you about it. You said, oh, you'll understand when you get older. Oh, don't worry, I can quit anytime. Or, oh, it's not a problem. But it's slowly eroding the trust you have with your kids. Is there a habit that just gives you a little bit of release or a little bit of pleasure or a little bit of escape, but yet you don't want anybody to know about it? Is there a place in your life that when you're there, you can be a whole entirely different person, and that brings you some kind of pleasure because it's not home or work, it's a different you, and you're not accountable for your actions there? Is there a pleasure right now that's bringing you what you think is momentary escape, but in the end, it is undermining your happiness? Because every time gets a little bit less of an enjoyment, and eventually it will ruin everything in your path. Now, can I just speak directly to the guys for just a second? Ladies, you can just talk amongst yourselves. Guys, it's just you and me, all right? You have an opportunity to make choices in your life that will either bless or undermine your family and your grandkids and even your great-grandkids, because the sins of the father get passed down. And if you are settling for a cheap pleasure, you are undermining your own happiness. But if you pursue the principles of happiness of God, you not only get happiness, you find pleasure in a greater degree than you'd ever find on your own. So let me ask you, is there a pleasure that's undermining your own happiness right now? And you know exactly what I'm talking about. And I'll tell you why you know what I'm talking about, because you're sitting with somebody that you're hoping doesn't bring it up when you get in the car. And you're going to get in the car, and they're going to bring it up, and you're going to go, I know, I'll work on it. And that's what you always say till they stop talking about it, and then you don't work on it. Can I just ask you to fast forward several years when your kids are engaged in that kind of behavior, or your daughter is dating somebody that acts like you and has decided to make the same decisions that you're making? Can I just ask you to think about how this impacts your peace? Not just with you and God, not just with you and yourself, but you and your family, and how ultimately will affect their peace as well. A lot of you know, because of social media, that Wednesday morning my father passed away, and I had a chance to be there with him the day before. And I flew to Missouri and got to spend a little time with him, and he'd been sick for quite a while, and he was ready. He was ready. And we knew where he was going, knew he'd be out of pain, and I kind of had this feeling when I spoke to him on Tuesday morning that this would be the last time that I talked to him. And I said things that I'd always knew that these would be my last words. I wanted to say these to him and tell him that I love him and I'll miss him and I'll never forget him, and I am who I am today because of him. And I went through a variety of things, and as I'm talking, I'm thinking about this message coming up. And I'm thinking about that verse of Jesus saying, the thief comes to steal and kill and destroy, but I've come that you may have life. And I'm thinking about how my dad's life is basically both sides of that verse. Because the first half of his life, he made the worst decisions. And he was his own worst enemy. And he lived a reckless and wild and crazy life that he often didn't like to talk about. But then he decided to give his life to Jesus. And he wasn't perfect, but I could see him constantly trying to just surrender over. God, what do you want me to do? I'm offering myself over to you. I don't understand this thing. I'm new to all this, but I want to do right for my kids. And I'm sitting there watching him prepare to go to heaven. And I'm thinking how his decision to pursue the principles of happiness that Jesus gave us, rather than just momentary pleasure, to pursue coming home at the end of the day, for staying home with us, for he passed up promotion so he could spend more time at home. Instead of going out every night with his buddies to be home and to throw the baseball with me, to pursue that. And how that choice right there not only brought him happiness, and not only brought him peace with God and with others and with himself. I'm standing there in that room waiting for him to go to heaven, and I have peace. He literally gave me the gift of peace because of the decisions he made and the choices that he made. And guys, this is for all of you. You have the opportunity to not just bring peace to your home, to your life, and your relationship with God, but you have the chance to bring peace to the next generation and the next generation and the next because you choose happiness of God rather than momentary pleasure. And when you do that, you'll stop chasing happy, and you'll find happiness is with you all along. Let's pray together. God, I thank you for your incredible love and grace, forgiveness and mercy. And I know there are some right now that are watching or listening along, and they're thinking, yeah, that's what I want to do. I just don't know how to do it. God, I pray that they would just offer themselves over to you right now. Say, Jesus, I'm ready for you to take over. I'm going to trust you. I don't know how to do it, so I'm going to trust you. God, there are some of us, we made that decision a long time ago, but along the way, we got allured by all these things that we think will bring us pleasure. But in the end, they undermine our own happiness. God, we know what those issues are, and we want to just leave them here today. Give them over to you. God, we want to be the kind of people that discover peace with you and with others and even with ourselves, but we want to be the kind of people that leave a legacy of peace to those that come after us. So God, we thank you for all the gifts that you have given us and the gift of your grace and your mercy, and we pray all of this in Jesus' name. Amen.